Salutations, mortals and children of the night. I am the Vampire Otaku. Welcome to Spooky Month. Welcome to Spooky Season. I am your host, the Vampire Otaku. Alright, in this video, I want to talk about Tales from the Hood. This movie was directed by Rusty Cundiff. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. And it came out May 24th, 1995. This movie is almost 30 years old. Oh, I'm getting old. And I believe is timeless, and I believe it aged very well. I just love the short stories in it. They were all really good. None of them outstayed their welcome. They were all told brilliantly, and they're still relevant today. Let's start off with one of the first stories, if I remember correctly. It was a case of a little boy being abused by a stepdad at home. Really hits hard. The boy believed that the stepdad was a monster, and he in fact attributed characteristics of a monster. And there's a caring teacher at school that wants to help the little boy, so he comes over the little boy's house to talk with his mother, and eventually he saw the stepfather there, and he just knew that things weren't right at home, and he really wanted to help this little kid out. So they rushed him out of the house, and as he goes to his car to unlock it and get in and drive away and go home, something in him just would not let that situation go. So he decides to stay, and he can hear yelling and screaming and violence outside the house. So he marches back in, and he sees that the stepdad is attacking the mom. The mom has like a bloody nose, it's hitting her. He then witnessed the violence firsthand, and he tried to fight the stepdad. The stepdad, outmaneuvered him and was probably a little bit stronger. The mom got sick of, the stepdad hitting her child, so she grabs a frying pan to hit the stepdad with, and he, catches it in midair. And he's cussing her out, calling her all kinds of names, and it was super villainous. They really wrote this character in a way where he was unlikable, and it really builds up all the other characters in this short story. And basically, the little boy got advice from a fellow student in his class. When you're scared of something and something is a monster, you draw it. And then when you fold it up and destroy it, it'll hurt the monster. And the teacher heard this and was like, well, that's not possible. Monsters aren't real, blah, blah, blah. But in the midst of the stepdad, about to strike the mom with a frying pan, he folds the dude's arm, and the guy's arm breaks. Then he balls it up, and the guy's bones are breaking and balling up. The effects are like cheesy, but so good. Like, I miss effects like that. Special effects, they don't hit the way these old effects do. The makeup, the costumes, everything. It just looks really cool. They defeat the evil stepdad. Yeah, happily ever after. It was a good, first beginning. And there are some main characters in the story. There's a guy that works at a funeral home. He dresses up the bodies. He's a mortician. That's the name of his occupation. And there's some gangbangers that came by that, assume that this mortician accidentally picked up some drugs and they want their merchandise back. So they're, basically trying to get their stuff back. And the mortician is like, I'm gonna give you the stuff, but let me tell you these stories about these people that recently died in this funeral home. The next story, I might have it out of order, but the next story is about crooked cops. Super relevant. There's gonna always be crooked cops. From the 90s, the early 2000s, the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, there's always gonna be crooked police. And basically, there's a black politician, I believe. Maybe he's running for mayor. I don't remember exactly how prevalent he was or what his occupation was, but he was cracking down on corrupt cops. He was exposing them. These police officers, they pulled him over and they were like, oh, this is that guy. We're gonna mess him up and make him wish he never said anything. And he's like, no matter what, I'm always going to fight for justice. I'm always going to make sure that the crooked cops in the system are taken down. And they're like, all right. So they beat him up real bad. They beat him up so bad that he's on the brink of death. So one of the cops in the car, he's a black guy. He's like, yo, you guys can't do that. That's wrong. You know who this guy is? You know, he's not a thug. He's not a gangbanger. He's a law-abiding citizen. You know, he didn't do anything wrong. And they're like, get back in the car, get back in the car. And he listened to him, even though in his heart he wanted to help the guy out. The police say that they're going to take him to the hospital, but instead of taking him to the hospital, spoilers, by the way, I hope, you know, you don't mind spoilers, but I hope these spoilers actually entice you to check this old movie out. I watched it for free on Tubi. So if you have a smart TV or you have that app, you could easily watch it and really enjoy this content. But anyway, so instead of taking this poor man to the hospital, they took him to a lake. They inject him with drugs. They put bags of cocaine in the back seat and they drive him off into the water. And that's, you know, that's all she wrote. That was the end of it. One of the cops, the black guy, you know, he had a guilty conscience. He started hearing voices. And the voice, well, just a voice. And the voice was, you know, the guy that they killed. And he just couldn't seem to rest, you know, knowing that amount of injustice happened. So one day he invites, you know, well, actually, let's back up a little bit. He sees a painting of the guy on the wall that they killed. The painting kind of changes. He looks very upset. It used to look peaceful. It looks upset now. The voices are, his voice is telling him, get those cops together. Bring them to me. Bring them to me. So the guy quits the police force. You know, one night he calls all the cops up that were involved and they all meet him in a graveyard. And he's drinking a lot and the cops are being super racist towards him. But, you know, he's standing his ground. He's like, you remember the guy that you guys killed? And one of the cops like, don't bring that up. Don't bring that up. The other cop was like, you know, if we go down, you go down too. He's like, I'm not worried about that. Are you guys too scared to visit his grave? Another cop was like, I'm not scared to visit his grave. Let's go. So they go to his graveyard. His tombstone. And one of the cops starts peeing on his tombstone. And they're just disrespecting him. And eventually the guy comes out of the ground, grabs the dude's ankle, and pulls him underground with him. After that, he one by one attacks the officers. He does some real brutal stuff to them, and very similar to the brutal things that they did to the guy. You know, one by one, he gets them, chops off one of their heads. He did something really cool to the last cop. He pulled him into the painting that was on the wall, the mural, and he was just stuck there, like just up against the wall, like and that was their end. And then the black guy, he's like, are we good? You know, I brought them to you. You know, I'm really sorry. And the guy's like, this part, it didn't sit that well with me, but, you know, as a vengeful spirit, I guess, vengeful spirits don't think that rationally. So that's kind of what I got out of it. He punished him too, but I understand why he punished him. He didn't kill the black guy, but the sirens. Saving somebody's life, hopefully. So he didn't kill the black guy, but he drove him mad with voices. And at the end of this story, the black guy is in an insane asylum, which back in the 90s, mental health in the black community and mental health period wasn't taken very well. So it's a pretty poor ending for his life. And I know that, you know, he was a coward for sitting back and letting those things happen. But as a black man in the 90s, you know, messing around with the cops is almost suicide. And to this day, and when you got a group of, you know, people being racist, you know, it's very dangerous to be courageous and to stand for justice. So I personally feel like the vengeful spirit was a little rough on him. At the same time, I understand how it feels when you want one of your own to like hold you down and fight for you, and they just, you know, let you down, and they were a coward. So it was a deep story. Another one of the stories was, if I remember correctly, so there was a politician, he's running for mayor, and he bought an old plantation house, and he was super racist. He did not care for black people at all. He bought this house, beautiful house, really big, and there's a giant painting on the wall. And the painting has a woman in her 50s, 60s in a rocking chair, and she has her hand on one doll. They're kind of like voodoo dolls. I mean, not really voodoo dolls or hoodoo dolls. They're just straight up dolls. They're like really durable. They're not cloth. They're more like a wood material. I don't know how to describe them that well, but in the movie they described her as a voodoo lady. So I don't know how accurate it is by the standards of culture, but that is what they referred to her as. The cool thing was all these dolls were. The legend has it that all the dolls were slaves and their souls got transported to the dolls, and they protect the house. If anybody moves in, they don't want anybody in the house until they've gotten reparations, but they're never going to get reparations because they're dead. So they just want the house to be left alone. Anytime someone moves there or spends too much time there, they get really violent. There's a guy working with the politician trying to clean up his image, trying to help him, with the minorities in the area, and trying to help him become mayor. He's filming him and trying to help him deal with the cameras and deal with people recording him and asking for his insight, answering questions, and the whole 9 yards. And as he's filming him and trying to help, he trips on one of the dolls and falls down the stairs and just dies immediately. So that lets you know right there that like they mean business. They don't care if you're racist, if you're not, if you're a white guy, if you're a black guy, black woman, whoever you are, these dolls want no one in this house. So this guy's living there and he's like, I'm not scared of no dolls. But then he notices that one of the dolls in the painting is gone and there's like a white spot, a blank spot where it was left. So the dolls are slowly coming out of the picture and coming into existence. They're messing with them. They're not instantly killing him. He's freaking out about it. He's like grabbing his shotgun, shooting the dolls whenever he sees them. He's getting upset, and more. He damaged the first doll a lot with the shotgun. You see more and more blank spots on the painting, more and more dolls coming. And by the end of that story, basically all the dolls are gone. They're all jumping on top of him, biting him, just hurting him badly. And then at the very, very end, the lady is in the room in a rocking chair. And the painting is, just a background. There's no one in the painting anymore. And they kill him. And that story was fun. It wasn't as detailed story-wise as the other short stories, but this one had an interesting lore, about the fact that the souls of the slaves were, transferred into dolls and they live on to protect that house. So the lore was really interesting. I like that a lot. The last story ties in with the characters that are in the present part of the story, because all these short stories are basically outside events that happened before these characters came into the mortician's life, asking for the stuff, the drugs. Now this story is actually more modern, or I wouldn't say modern, but more up to date. Not as past tense, it's more present tense. The guys are walking by trying to find out where the drugs are, and they notice the body in a casket, and they jump back. And the guy's like, you recognize them? And then the guy's like, no, we don't recognize them. And in reality, they do. So in this story, there's a gangbanger. He's driving like a Fox Body Mustang, and he rolls up on another gangbanger, and the other gangbanger's trying to go home, and he's like, what's up, man? He was like, I heard you was talking about me. He was like, man, I don't know what you're talking about. 90s lingo. We're very reminiscent of Tupac and Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre and NWA. All that is very similar to that style of speech and clothing and everything, really. So he runs up on him, just shoots him. Honestly, there was not much of a dialogue between them before the guy just started shooting. He had no mercy, wasted no time, really. And he shot him a few times, and then he got shot. He somehow lived, and they took him to jail almost immediately. I'll say a lady in her 50s, really cool locks in her hair. She says, you want a chance to get out of here? And he's like, yeah. She's like, all right. So she takes him to this facility. And this facility really messes with your mind, and it messes with your body too. Makes you see visions. And she's trying to convince him to leave his life of gangbanging behind so she could let him back out in the system. Well, not in the system, into the world. And he just can't break free of this macho, angry thug life, basically. And there's an interesting scene. He's locked in a cage before he's doing the experiments. And right next to him is like a white power neo-Nazi kind of guy. He's got the swastikas tattooed, all kinds of crazy stuff. And he's messing with him. He's like, yeah, you know what I'm here for? For killing black people. And the guy punches him in the face and he's like, all right, yeah. But you in here for killing too. Who'd you kill? And the guy's thinking back and he's like, wow, I killed only black people. I've only killed people in my community. So that really messed with his head. He was like, I like you. And it's a trip being black and hearing like a white power neo-Nazi, liking you and being happy about what you do, killing your own kind, killing your own people and destroying your own neighborhoods. So his head's already messed up a little bit. He's just got there. So they're sending him images, people he's killed. They got records of like all the people that died because of him. And he shot a lot of people. He killed a lot of people. And he's young. He's probably like 19 or 20 and he's already killed like almost a room full of people, being a gangbanger. He's starting to break out of it, but he can't let his armor crack. He can't let himself be seen vulnerable or soft. So he reverts back all the way. And he's like, I don't care. And he keeps saying it over and over again. And then it shows, and then she's like, I'm trying to save you. It's really touching. It's really moving. And then it basically pans forward into him lying on the ground, blood coming out of his mouth. I don't care. And the gangbanger's like, we don't care either. And they shoot him again in the head. So it was like, it seems like all that stuff might have happened in his mind and there was never a facility and he never, got taken to jail, or all that stuff happened. But since he couldn't, save himself, they just let him get shot on the street. So that was super interesting. And that was the last story. But after that, the story gets more interesting because it pans back to the mortician, wanting to tell more stories. And the gangbanger's like, we ain't got time for that. Where's the drugs? One of the gangbangers got really upset and pistol whipped him. And he's like, where's the drugs? So he's like, all right, it's in the room right there. And they go into the room and he's like, it's in those caskets. There's 3 caskets, 3 gangbangers there. So as you're watching it, you're putting everything together and you're like, nah, they're not getting what they came for. They're not getting the drugs. They open the caskets up and they see themselves lying in the caskets. And they got guns and they're pointing the guns like, stop messing with us. And then, the guy transforms into the devil. This isn't a game. Like, you guys are already dead. I was just messing with y'all, giving y'all a little time to enjoy my stories before we can, start this torment. And that was the movie. It was really interesting to have an overarching theme, but also have a few short stories in the middle of it. And it was a great way to enjoy this spooky season. It was a spooky movie, but it was very deep and like I said earlier, very timeless. It just held up really well. Then I found out that there was a Tales from the Hood 2. It was trash. Like, I couldn't even finish it. It's cool that it exists. One day I might finish it, but not this month. I got too many other great things to talk about and to read and to watch. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is probably Carmilla. That's the first novel I read in quite some time because I've been reading mostly mangas. Can't wait to talk to you guys about that. In the meantime, peace, stay spooky.